Victoria Mitchell, a secretly successful CEO, discovers a family video where her parents and sister call her a failure, the same family she's anonymously funded for 5 years. She anonymously sponsors her sister Sophie's lavish promotion party. At the reveal, Victoria's identity is disclosed as the platinum sponsor. She exposes that she funded the family's mortgage, medical bills, and loans, and then announces those anonymous payments will end. The fallout forces the family to confront their cruelty. Victoria sets firm boundaries and rebuilds relationships on new terms. The elevator opens and the city pours in a river of evening suits, glittering phones, the distant hum of a skyline that never sleeps. Victoria Mitchell steps out onto the marble, her heels whispering a steady beat that no one notices at first. The top floor is hers for 10 minutes before the world remembers. Glass walls frame a river of lights below. A portrait of her younger self in a Forbes feature hangs like a relic. She straightens the lightweight black dress she picked because it felt modest in a room that expected pyrotechnics. At home, they call it working from the bedroom. Here, it's 3 floors of reserved conference rooms, a whiteboard filled with acquisition targets, and a receptionist who smiles when her name is spoken into a calendar invitation. No one in those old Sunday dinner stories can reconcile the two versions. So Victoria wears both, quietly, the way one wears winter coats in spring, necessary, out of season for the people who live only in summers. Tonight, she's going to Sophie's promotion party. She told herself to keep it small, a cordial nod, applause from her assigned corner. But when the text landed in her phone the night before, a short clip that wasn't meant for her, it folded her life into a single shot, a family laughing in a restaurant, their faces lit by candlelight, mouths making offhand cruelties into a camera resting against a purse. "Poor Victoria," someone said. "She'll never amount to anything." They laughed like it was a private joke. Victoria closes the laptop, opens a drawer, and touches a stack of invoices she has signed without fanfare. They are quiet things: legal paper, red-stamped notices, bank transfers logged under phantom trust names. Names of hospitals, mortgage accounts, loan numbers. Each line is a quiet rescue she never announced. There's a ridiculous tenderness in the way she cataloged them, a ledger that chronicles care and the slow burn of being unseen by one's own people. She doesn't feel like a martyr. She feels tired of the small indignities, the smallings around the mashed potato dish, the mechanical praise reserved for Sophie like it's a family heirloom. She's learned to build a life that needs no approval, to convert every insult into a spreadsheet that says, "I did this. This is what you owe me, not in money, but in accountability." The video broke something loose. It was the nail pulled from a boarded floor. At 7:15, she arrives at the Ritz. The ballroom breathes with curated success, executives, cocktails, laughter that centrifuges small talk into headlines. Sophie is already there, the room's bright center, red dress, a practiced smile like a script. Their parents hold court nearby, sequins and pride. The seating chart, in gilded calligraphy, assigns Victoria to table 12, the polite burying of the inconvenient sibling. She sits for a long time and drinks nothing. Around her, conversations name-check consultants she's worked with, clients she's steered. A few heads tilt her way with the recognition that lands like a soft, delayed rumor. "That's Victoria Mitchell?" They whisper. "We couldn't get a meeting with her." The whispers are the tiniest kindness, proof that the world that respects her is not the same one that raised her. The MC steps up. The platinum sponsor's slot blinks empty on the screen, pulse of an unclaimed crown. Sophie's smile tightens. A countdown begins. Victoria closes her eyes for a second and remembers the video, the laughter, the offhand cruelty, and decides, with a calm that is more terrifying than anger, to let truth have an audience. The countdown thins the room into a single wire of focus. Crystal bulbs reflect in 1,000 eyes. Conversations hush like winter snow settling. Sophie stands on stage and, as if rehearsed to land blows in silk, thanks the room for support, for mentors, for a family who understood dedication. Her words are a practiced ladder, every rung polished for applause. Mom dabs at a tear with theatrical precision. Dad's chest puffs. The air tastes like triumph and cheap champagne. Victoria feels the itch that always arrives before a career decision, small and electric behind the ribs. Once, she would have sent a message in the middle of the night, a conciliatory text to patch a bruise. Once, she would have let humiliation slide in public to keep the peace at home. But the video settled under her skin like a shard. It explained years of invisible labor. It changed the math of patience. She checks her watch. The AV team flutters like moths at the back, Marcus's presence a calm reef in the chaos. He catches her eye and gives the small nod that says everything is in place. The sponsorship, the anonymity clause, the redaction of names, every contractual footnote she weaponized into a reveal that would feel surgically clean. Anonymity wasn't about mystery. It was about the moment strategy. At the table, a woman from a firm Victoria had salvaged years ago leans forward, curiosity closing the distance. "You must be Sophie's sister," she offers. "Tell me what she's like." The question lands as a polite interrogation. Victoria answers with a measured smile, saying only what's necessary, letting the woman keep her assumptions. Assumptions are fragile. They can be shattered in an instant. Sophie glances offstage, the rehearsal smile starting to fray. She approaches the podium, as elegantly as a performer turning to their cue, and thanks every hand that pushed her. Then she draws breath and flicks, without knowing, at the wound. "Some of us were told we'd never make it. Thank you for making me prove them wrong." Her eyes sweep the crowd and travel over Victoria like a spotlight that doesn't warm. The sting is private, meant to be private, but the night has a way of widening everything. Victoria's fingers hover near her phone. One option is erasure. Cancel the sponsorship. Let the ledger close unseen. Let the family continue in blissful ignorance. But for whom would that be kindness? For them, it would be preserving an illusion that purports to value them. For her, it would be another year of invisible debts. She rolls the decision over like a coin. The audience leans into the screens. A countdown promises revelation. Sophie's chest tightens. She expects a benefactor with industry creds. Maybe a startup with swagger, maybe an influential board member. She never imagines the person quietly filing the checks into a redacted trust is the daughter they mock. The MC clears his throat. The countdown blinks into single digits. A hush folds into the room like a physical thing. Victoria thinks of the ledger again. The mortgage payments, the hospital invoices, the student loans named like insults in the video. She thinks of how she used to bend to let their definitions fit her. No more. The strategic clause in the contract hums like a promise. This night will be the first time truth enters a place where power was previously only posture. Sophie catches sight of Victoria and offers a half-smile sharpened by nerves. They exchange a few words, clipped, ceremonial, and Victoria's calm reply does what she intends. It buys the room its finale. She slips her phone into her clutch and waits for the stage lights to mark the moment. Around her, the ballroom leans into expectation, not knowing the lesson it is about to receive. The screen goes black for a breath. Then a corporate fade, logos roll as if in a dream, each smaller than the last, until the platinum slot blooms into Victoria's firm like a slow-fired bloom against winter. Gasps ripple through the room, a ripple that quickly becomes a chord. Sophie's hand trembles. A champagne flute finds the floor and shatters into a constellation at her feet. For a second, the world tilts. Recognition spreads from person to person the way a scent travels. She's the CEO. Forbes 40 under 40. Mitchell Holdings manages our pension. Faces that had never looked at Victoria more than a polite nod now tilt forward with a new currency: interest. A man who had just been shaking Dad's hand lets out a laugh that is half incredulous, half regret. Victoria rises. Her steps on the marble are measured, a metronome for every old slight. As she ascends the stage, the murmurs sharpen into a concrete hum of industry names and past refusals. "We tried to schedule a meeting," one says. Emails went unanswered. The Morrison Industries CEO's jaw drops as he realizes the very person they wanted at the top table has been sitting in podium-level silence all night. At the mic, Victoria's voice is clean, neutral, not triumphalist, not pleading. "Good evening," she says. Her name on the screen is not an accusation, it is evidence. Then, with the same composed cadence she uses in boardrooms, she congratulates Sophie. The honesty of that moment is like a chess move played with surgical kindness. It disarms pity while sharpening accountability. The real twist is practical and merciless. Marcus clicks another slide. Redacted documents fill the screen. Notarized records of 5 years of anonymous payments. The room inhales. The numbers, displayed clinically, travel like an accusation. Mortgages. Medical bills. Loan payments. $300,000, precise and cold. The quiet anger in the room is tangible. For an instant, the world seems to pause to watch the scaffolding of their assumptions collapse. Sophie's face performs its unraveling in fast edits, confusion, denial, then the aware dread of someone whose illusions are being stripped in real time. She gropes for a microphone to speak, but the cadence of events is already out of her hands. Her father's face moves through shades of disbelief to anger, as if humiliation travels through him like electricity, visible in the twitch of muscle and the stiffness of his jaw. People who had raised their glasses in toast look suddenly brittle. Conversations that less than a heartbeat ago were background music become a hunt for narrative. Clients who had dismissed Victoria as aloof now approach like moths drawn to revealed flame. Some apologize. Some only want to know how soon they can schedule an appointment. Sophie's colleagues exchange stunned looks. The woman they applauded is now standing within her own myth. The twist lands not as a single blow but as an architectural demolition. What looked like familial truth was supported by money none of them knew the source of. Victoria announces, measured and decisive, that the anonymous support programs will conclude. She frames the decision not as punishment, but as a boundary. Everyone must now stand on their merits. The words land with the clean finality of a gavel. Sophie's reaction is not immediate rage, it is something quieter and more human, the pale, hollow look of someone who loses not only convenience, but also identity. She lunges toward explanations, then collapses into a flood of small, private admissions. Victoria's revelation has rewritten the ledger of their lives. Benefactor and freeloader switch places in public. The room refracts the truth. People's loyalties adjust, trade, and bargain in the space left behind. Silence cracks into chaos. Phones bloom with notifications. Industry contacts message in waves. The Morrison CEO scrambles to reconcile contracts. Reporters surgically film the scene like vultures attending a feast, already drafting headlines. And somewhere under the din, Victoria feels the exact tilt she planned for, the perfect clarity of consequences. Sophie's legs are liquid under her, the sculpted posture unraveling into something raw. She steps down from the stage and crosses the room to find Victoria, breath shallow. The two of them stand face to face amid the papery noise of a ballroom that no longer understands how to host the truth. Sophie's voice is small for once, stripped of its usual performative bravado. "We didn't know," she says. The sentence is an attempt at absolution, a plea camouflaged as fact. Victoria has rehearsed this moment in 100 sterile boardrooms, not for the theatrics, but for the moral clarity it requires. She could have annulled all payments, left them gasping for air and consequence. Instead, she chooses surgical compassion. "You lived on money I provided," she says, and her voice is precise, devoid of triumph. "You have 30 days to make alternate arrangements." It is a condition that is at once humane and unyielding. She will not enable the patterns of entitlement that destroyed her sense of family. The crowd witnesses the moment like a moral contest. Some applaud the rigor of consequence, others murmur indignation at seeming cruelty. The distinction between punishment and boundary blurs under the theater lights. Marcus slides documents across the stage, redacted ledgers, notarized notices, and a timetable that reads with the efficient cruelty of corporate policy. The legalities remove the personal odor of revenge and replace it with the cold air of accountability. Sophie's protests come like staccato notes. She cites promotions, hard work, and gratitude. Her words are sincere yet hollowed by the awareness that gratitude had been bought under an assumption of incompetence. The scene changes as she searches for a leverage point, an ally in the crowd, an investor's sympathetic nod. But the room's focus has shifted. The applause that followed her earlier speech has been redirected into scrutiny. For the parents, the revelation is a collapse of narrative. Dad's chest heaves with the stalled pride that cannot reconcile the fact he toasted one child while living on another's generosity. Mom's face twists between shame and anger, a domestic cyclone of wounded ego. They find themselves in positions they rarely occupy, the ones needing help, the ones exposed. As Victoria steps down from the stage, the room folds around her like a river around a stone. Clients surround her, professional opportunities bloom in fragments of business talk. Yet the personal fallout is the slow, private sound. She listens for the sound of walls either cracking or resetting. Sophie follows her to the edge of the ballroom, breath ragged. "You could have told us," she says, and the plea sounds less certain now. "You could have wanted us to try." Victoria studies the woman she grew up with, talent threaded with entitlement. She does not flinch. "I wanted honesty," she says, "not performances." Her words are not absolution or punishment. They are a boundary. She allows a single concession. She will keep paying for Mom's critical medication. It is a life-sparing line that declares care separate from consent. Dad's protests peak into a theatrical indignation, accusations of betrayal, of humiliation. This is what he chooses, to see the reveal as a public slight rather than a private correction. The dinner conversations he once controlled are now being retold by a world outside the home, and with every retelling their power diminishes. The immediate aftermath rocks the firmament of their family mythology. Some doors slam. Others open slightly. Victoria walks toward the exit with the steady gait of someone who has traded the safety of invisibility for the clarity of being seen and being respected. The ballroom parts, and the applause is not for spectacle, but for a woman who finally named what she would not subsidize anymore. The car doors close and the world condenses into a ring of windows and city lights. Notifications still ping like rain. Marcus reports the corporate fallout, new clients, headlines, stock ripples. But the climax is not the market's pulse. The climax is the exchange in her office 2 days later, face-to-face with Sophie, who has come down from the glamour into a smaller, stripped room of truth. Sophie appears smaller than before, mascara smudged, dress creased, posture unpracticed. She holds a folder like an offering. "We can't keep the apartment," she says. "Dad's firm is collapsing. Mom needs full coverage. I don't know what to do." Her voice fractures. The rehearsed quips are gone. The vulnerability is raw, but so is the honesty. She had never known the scaffolding that supported her. Victoria waits, not for contrition, but for recognition. This is not the catharsis of revenge. It's a pivot that has 1,000 small cogs, consequences, repair, and limits. She slides a single document forward, a plan. Medication payments only, direct to the pharmacy. No cash handouts. A transitional schedule for Sophie's student loans, but with firm stipulations, budgeting classes, financial counseling, and a staged buyout that requires demonstrated accountability. For Dad, voluntary restructuring of his business, a severance-like option, but no rescue packages on Victoria's terms. Sophie's protests are immediate and human. "We are family," she pleads. Family doesn't issue invoices. Victoria's answer is not cruel, it is precise. Family protects each other, yes. Family doesn't buy silence or tolerate abuse. She reads him back every Sunday insult, each careless, "You'll never amount to anything," like a litany. Sophie winces as if stung by each syllable. The slow realization that a lifetime of entitlement was propped by money labeled otherwise settles across her face. The moment becomes an incision. Sophie's tears are not for the money lost, but for an identity ruptured. She kept a fantasy that her merit stood alone. The reveal suggests otherwise. This is the heart of the climax, not the financial exposure, but the collapse of a carefully curated self. Sophie must now decide whether to own her mistakes or retreat into victimhood. Victoria's final act in that room is not dramatic public shaming. It is administrative, calendars scheduled, conditions listed, help offered within strict boundaries. She will not be their silent bank anymore. She will be a limited guardian of essentials, not an enabler of performance. The ledger will remain open to accountability, not to indulgence. When Sophie reaches for an apology, it is halting and honest. "I didn't realize." That admission is both an opening and a wound. Victoria accepts it conditionally. Truth is the first step. Actions will follow. The climax is not catharsis. It is a careful, adult reordering of relationships, a demotion of entitlement, and a promotion of responsibility. Outside the office window, the city moves on indifferent. Inside, a family record rewrites itself in small, boring steps: appointments, budgets, counseling sessions. The emotional thunder that once lived in dramatic reveals now moves into the tedious mercy of day-to-day accountability. That is where real change, if any, will take root. 6 months later. The Mitchell household looks different in ways no remodel could achieve. Dad's consulting firm sold and replaced by a mid-level position with a smaller title and a steadier, humbler schedule. The pride that once needed performance now mutters in quieter rooms. Mom works part-time at a medical office where the staff know her by name. She keeps the job for the routine and the insurance. Her face has less flair, more lines softened by time and perhaps reflection. Sophie learned how to live within a budget. She traded a walk-in closet of designer dresses for functional pieces and weekly spreadsheets. She attends a financial literacy course offered through a local nonprofit, a small, stubborn step toward owning the life she said she wanted. She and Victoria meet for lunch once a month, not to trade trophies, but to trade truths. Their conversations are tentative, sometimes blunt, often practical. On one afternoon, Sophie says, "Without fanfare, I never told anyone you were my sister." It is the admission of a shame that used to be an armor. Victoria kept one promise. Mom's cardiac medication continues, paid directly via pharmacy transfers. It's a small, non-negotiable line she drew. A life kept alive by care, not by complicity. All other anonymous support ended. The family's financial scaffolding became its own responsibility. For some, that was devastating. For others, awakening. Outside the domestic shifts, Victoria's life broadened in the way of people who stopped performing for validation. Business grew in the wake of the reveal. Clients reached out, intrigued by the woman who held composure under fire. She maintained the professional rigor that built her firm, but she also stopped measuring her worth in the applause of rooms where she once felt invisible. Her power quieted from spectacle to calibration. When they return to Sunday dinners months later, the table feels different. No thunderous toasts, fewer comparisons, more awkward silences that slowly turn into conversation. There are still missteps. Mom occasionally slips into old patterns, and Dad's pride flares in brief, guilty bursts. But there's also a new vocabulary: respect, boundaries, practical asks, and real apologies. The awkwardness holds promise rather than threat. Sophie and Victoria developed a fragile, honest sibling code. It's practical rather than performative, the kind that pays student loans with invoices and shows up for tough conversations without theatrics. One evening, over a modest meal, Sophie lifts her glass and says, to Victoria, "Not because you made us, but because you helped us be better when we asked for it." It is not a perfect apology, but it is real. Victoria learned something more profound than vindication. Power without boundaries becomes resentment. Generosity without reciprocity becomes a prison. She learned to choose compassion that includes conditions. She still loved them enough to save a life, not to subsidize cruelty. Her final lesson: being seen doesn't need a stage. Respect, once won, is quieter, but infinitely steadier. The ledger sits now in a drawer she opens only when necessary, not as a weapon, but as a map of decisions made. Victoria walks through her downtown office on a clear morning and thinks about the woman she used to be: invisible, patient, and exhausted. She smiles at the difference. Success did not erase the scars. It only made them relevant to a life she would no longer give away. At the end of the day, she closes her laptop and steps outside into a city that does not owe her understanding. She does not need their praise anymore. She simply needs their honesty.